we're sold out now. There are only tickets available for the finalist teams, and even then, there are going to be a lot of disappointed fans. On the point around your podcast a few weeks ago around star power, we may or may not have circulated that around the business because it really spoke to us. Like, it spoke to me because it's exactly what we're trying to do and what we want to do. We can't just be on every week and assume that we're going to get cut through and compete against football and Formula One. I've been very strong on the team and going, right, well, how would WWE promote this? There was always this feeling of like, almost like the international scene doesn't acknowledge where these people play in the league. Whereas in football, it's something that's done really, really overtly.
You sold 7,000 tickets for the final, basically straight after the final whistle of last year's final. That seems counterintuitive to me because I would only want to go to a final if it was my team in it.
The reason we sold so many tickets at full time last year is because...
Hello and welcome to the Sports Pundit podcast, the show exclusively for the people shaping the future of sport. Driven by my curiosity working within the industry, I started this show to host conversations with decision makers from the MLB to the ICC, unpacking their strategies and industry shaping ideas. On today's episode, I'm joined by Sukh Sadhra, Head of Marketing at Premiership Rugby, the top tier of English club rugby union, and home to some of the most iconic teams in the game. Sukh's background spans roles at Betfair, Sky, and experience tech company Pollen, where he led CRM and brand communications, giving him a uniquely data-driven and fan-first approach to sports marketing. In this conversation, we unpack Sukh's marketing philosophy, how he's repositioning Premiership Rugby for a new generation of fans, and why the final at Twickenham has become a sellout event 2 years running. We talk creativity, conversion, culture, and what it takes to turn a rugby match into an unmissable experience. So, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Sukh Sadhra. Thank you so much for taking the time, particularly at this busy point in the season, to come on the podcast. Where I like to head with all of these conversations is to first get a bit of background about your journey and how you've ended up where you are, and then we can start to pull up different threads of what you've sort of taken along the way into your current role.
So you'll see from my CV that I had a big stint at Betfair where I would describe them as my marketing formative years. And then I went through to Sky, and then via a few startups, I've actually found myself at Pollen and now got into Premiership Rugby. So there's kind of betting, there's television, there's music tech, and then there's an event tech and an experience tech, and now there's rugby. And actually, where I've probably been asked in the past, like, well, how do these things even relate to each other? My thing's always been where actually it's linked through fandom. Like, all of these products are things that people can be obsessed about and people have the passion for. And so kind of my wheelhouse or my sweet spot of marketing is I often think that I work in places where fandom exists of this product and really tapping into that enthusiasm is what I like to do.
Yeah. In terms of marketing to fans versus marketing to consumers, I guess that's quite a critical distinction. Like, how do you go about marketing when fandom is involved?
I think there's two strands to it, right? The first one is really showcasing to those fans and selling to those fans who are already in the ecosystem, and it's protecting them, nurturing them, building your brand, staying true to your values, and actually understanding how their attention might be changing. So what are you fighting for in their attention space? What are you fighting for in their wallet? If there's things that are changing and there's a share of wallet issue, you've got to take that into account. And then there's always this element of, well, how are you going to get more people, more casual, more passive people to become fans? And a lot of that is shining a light on something. And so actually, when I worked at Betfair, for example, I never ever thought of us as a group or us as a team as betting, we're selling betting. We weren't doing that. We were selling sport. Our busiest days were Friday evenings when we were getting ready for campaigns on the weekend ahead of the weekend's football. And our busiest weeks were Cheltenham week. Of course, there's lots of betting that goes on, but we were really, really promoting sport and trying to get those people who had a passive interest in betting and maybe a bit of an outside view on the betting world, but really getting them becoming quite enthusiastic about how they can use their knowledge and passion to get rewarded for it. And if I fast forward through to Premiership Rugby now, where we absolutely have a job to do in promoting the sport to new fans and younger fans and more diverse fans, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later. But equally, we've got to kind of be custodians as well to our existing fan base and people who love rugby and watch it every week. So that I always think there's these two elements at play which kind of work in harmony, actually.
In terms of working, I guess, previously for Betfair and promoting sport, and then obviously at Pollen, you're promoting a lot of music experiences. Maybe it's worth explaining a little bit more what Pollen do. But how does that shift now that you're on the rights holder side? And how do you think about working with brands that I guess have a joint interest in promoting you as a property because that benefits them?
Yeah. So Pollen, for anybody who doesn't know, they were subject of a BBC documentary in the way that the funding kind of came in and then disappeared. I would encourage everybody to give it a Google and have a look. But it was an incredible kind of period in my career and in my life. We were a business that essentially built music experiences around artists and live music. So one of the biggest campaigns we worked on was one with Justin Bieber, and there was different um, different artists of different scales across the board, whether it was Andy C or J Balvin for the Latin music market. And it was incredible because we were kind of doing this during the pandemic, and I had a team, a really really good team that was working with me that was spread across the UK, the east coast of the US, and the west coast of the US as well. Um, and the real learning there, I think, for when I'm talking to partners at Premiership Rugby, is the thing that I'm trying to really get across is the authenticity element of things. Like music fans are so passionate about the artists that they love. Music fans are so deeply ingrained in the actions of those artists, and any business that associates themselves with the artist, the stakes are really high. The artist doesn't want to put their name to experience and things that could potentially damage them, and because they know the fallout from fans. And my view with our commercial partners is that when we are in having conversations with partners, or if we're going to pitch or we're talking to new businesses, I'll always say is how are you going to appear authentically a part of the product? Like, I think sport needs to go way beyond just badging exercises. I know that there's a bread and butter of inventory and LED and front of share sponsorship and things like this. But actually, how are you showing up in those moments to really feel authentically part of the Premiership Rugby journey? And the reason for that is I think fans spot it. Fans kind of don't necessarily always appreciate when they're being directly sold to. But if they're hearing from a business or they're hearing from a commercial partner, which is fundamentally a part of the fabric of that company, I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah. And I mean, your previous roles, CRM is in the title of quite a few of them. Coming from that sort of specific part of marketing in terms of like really understanding databases and how to kind of extract information about users or fans so that you can maybe better personalize the outreach and the way that you're approaching those audiences. How has that kind of bled through to what you're now doing at Premiership Rugby? And then I guess the second part to that is like, what was that process or database like when you walked in versus where are you trying to get it to?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So you are right, you've observed it right. I ran CRM at Pollen and worked in retention roles at Sky and Betfair. And that was, I think at the time, a real big clamor for marketing talent. People kind of knew that they were acquiring customers relatively cost effectively, but actually they were losing them out of the funnel. The thing for me is when I come into Premiership Rugby, actually every rights holder is really, really hungry for data. Every rights holder, every governing body, everybody wants the data. And actually, the way I've approached it is slightly differently, where I've kind of said, well, what do we want the data for? What are we going to do with it? I came in and I was given some pretty bold targets on how much data we wanted to acquire. And you can do it relatively easily if you don't really care about the quality of the data. Whereas actually, what I wanted to do was spend some time on improving our engagement. So one of our partners that we work with in Crowd, who look after our CRM for us and work very closely with us, we worked very closely with not just going, yeah, we want 100,000 more followers or we want 100,000 more people on our database. We've worked really closely with actually saying, well, we want our click-through rates and our open rates on email to improve along with it, because then it means you're engaging the right kind of audience. And I
Yeah.
think that's the big thing I've brought over. I think it's not
Yeah.
just a case of grabbing all the data you can. It's actually, what are you going to do with it once you have it? So that's a thread that I've been able to lean in on. In terms of the Premiership, look, in the last 3 years, we've got like 100% growth in our data records. We've brought in 250,000 new data points in the last few years through a number of initiatives, whether that is our app. We've got a ticketing app for our final. So 80,000 people in the stadium. We know who most of them are, unless they're not children, of course. We work really closely with our partners to do various kind of competitions and giveaways. But we also had an OTT product for a period of time where you could watch Premiership matches that weren't being televised on our broadcast partner. All of these things come together to form our data strategy. And we've done really, really well with our data capture. But we are at a point where yeah, we have to constantly ask ourselves, what exactly are we planning on doing with this data?
Yeah. To your point, the easiest metrics when it comes to data are those kind of width metrics, right? It's like how many views are you getting? How
Exactly.
many subscribers have you got? Like I find this even with a kind of niche sports industry podcast, right? Like if you're putting it out on YouTube, it's very easy to get drawn to the kind of like total views number or to get drawn into like how many subscribers you have rather than the depth metric, which is actually a lot more valuable, right? It's like, who is it that's listening? Because actually, do you want 10,000 fans listening to your podcast, or is it actually better to have 10 decision makers that are all
Yeah.
CEOs of clubs, right? Like which one's actually more valuable to you depending on what your audience is and the niche that you're trying to target?
1,000%, 1,000%, because we've got it where we were collecting real in-depth data on some of our users, and I kind of dumbed it down a little bit. It didn't really matter to me when somebody's birthday was, and actually it did matter what roughly the age was because that has commercial implications. But I think you're 1,000% correct. And what we've done at Premiership Rugby is we want eyeballs on our sport, right? We want eyeballs, whether that is on television, on socials, ears on radio, and we are trying to break out of our bubble. Rugby does operate in a bit of a bubble, and so um, I think our acquisition policy has been quite aggressive, but probably we are not yet at the point where we're getting to the next level of right. Well, how are we deeply going to personalize things? We know that a lot of our people that come in around 60% of them have a favorite team, which is great, and we want to know their favorite team, and we target and give them personalized comms or even a personalized experience on our app and website as a result of the team they select. But broadly speaking, like even if you said you're not a member of a team, you still have a fantastic experience with Premiership Rugby and signing up to our database. So I think you're 100% correct. I think again, why are you collecting the data? What is the purpose of your data collection? And where we see with some of our clubs actually, where they want to know about more people that are in stadium, and I've seen it in football where some people want to know kind of what they're spending in the club shop and things like this. This is all useful stuff, but yeah,
Yeah.
I think you've got to really be clever about how you're using all that data.
Are there any metrics that you're specifically interested in that are maybe like atypical? So like an example for me, right, is like I'll monitor replies I get on email and like the sentiment of the people replying because you don't
Yeah,
get that many replies, but like that
yeah,
will actually tell me a lot more about the quality of the content because if I put out a newsletter, the open rate doesn't necessarily reflect the quality of the content. It reflects the quality of the title of the
yeah,
content.
yeah.
So it's hard for me to know, was that a good article or not, unless I'm getting people in my inbox saying, "Oh, I really found that valuable. Thank you." Or I shared this with a colleague. I appreciate you writing about this.
Yeah, we look at so look with emails, we absolutely look at and push notifications. We look at in terms of engagement, right? Clicks, like how many people have gone through to content, and then we sort of do sometimes spend a bit of time on how long people are spending on site. What we actually do is this might feel a little bit crude, but we look at what pages and what Google searches we get coming up in, and invariably it is people want to know the league table because it moves so much. People want to know fixtures, and people want to know where to buy tickets. And then we are very deliberate about our content as a result. We put that on our social channels. We put that across our CRM. And we even feed some of that information through to our broadcaster because we know that they get the most eyes on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Friday night. And we will work with TNT to kind of go, hey, look, lots and lots of people currently trying to buy tickets for the final. And you should really tell them there's not many left. And it's that kind of approach where we let a lot of different data signals tell us what's important. We are always chasing sales to final or app downloads. We are absolutely always looking for that. The other thing I would say that we are really keen on is actually gender split. Um, we are saying that we want to be a brand that's more representative of modern Britain. So we want a younger audience and one that is more even in the gender split. We are still predominantly have a male database. And so we monitor that actually. We look at kind of how many females are engaging and is our content actually appealing to those people? And we look at how that operates.
Yeah. So would an example there be like if you put out a piece of content and notice that you're getting a lot of female signups, you know that that's something where you should possibly
Exactly
double
that. Yeah.
content because that's attracting an audience that maybe doesn't represent the kind of
Yeah,
average.
that's correct. And then on the additional side is we go one step further of well, how many females are looking to be present at our final? That is always going to be our proof of the pudding, I think, of how many females then went on to buy tickets to the final. And that number goes up and down given what time of year it is. But we want to get to a point where like the final itself is got a real good representation of society in it. And that is really a cherry on top of the cake for us.
Yeah, I mean, going back to something we were talking about just before we started recording, which was about kind of being more representative in the type of hires. Like we were discussing, like your background in terms of the CV that you have doesn't maybe reflect that of a traditional rugby hire. Like quite often you'll see positions in rugby where they've been in rugby for 10, 15 years and they've maybe
Yeah.
worked at multiple clubs.
Yeah.
What kind of advantage do you think you have coming at it from outside, and why are you so bullish on hiring more from outside rugby, but also potentially outside of sport?
I've seen it in countless examples in different organizations since coming into the world of sport. Like if you have an objective as a business to target outside of a traditional audience segment or an audience base that you currently speak to, I think you've really got to have that voice around the table. There's so much to be said around diversity and the benefits it brings. And diversity takes lots of different forms. It's not always the color of somebody's skin or the gender they identify as. For me, diversity is also the sorts of businesses they come from. And I think that sometimes you need, I think, a group of people or a group of voices to have that kind of friendly friction around the table. And one of the voices represented should be, if not more than one, should be people from outside of the world of sport, understanding how people are thinking in terms of data acquisition, understand how people are thinking around the agencies they use. Like there's a lot of kind of, when I came in, I realized that kind of every sport was using kind of one of 5 or 6 agencies, and everybody was employing certain agencies to have an app built and a website built, and it seemed to follow this really linear path. But however, every sport has different challenges. Every sport has different budget sizes. Every sport has different broadcast partners and all these things that all should be influencing factors on things. And I think that if you can get people who have worked in various industries, I think you'll get some really good, fresh ideas that challenges the assumptions. You've got to challenge assumptions every year, all the time. You've got to be challenging what you think is potentially right and wrong.
Are there any industries that you're particularly keen on learning from?
Um, I really kind of talk to the team about entertainment. Like, if we really think about what we are a sports right holder as Premiership Rugby. We are not a governing body. And I think sometimes we straddle that space a little bit in the wrong direction, potentially. We do have responsibilities when it comes to player welfare and player health and how that works. But in essence, we're trying to entertain fans. We're trying to sell a product that is entertainment. And we often look at, or when we're kind of doing our, I suppose, brainstorming and ideation as a team, I've been very strong on the team and going, right, well, how would WWE promote this? What does a fight week feel like on the build up to a massive boxing match? How are people doing this in the world of Netflix or Spotify? And I think some of these brands were represented around the table when I worked at Pollen, and you saw that benefit come through. So I would love for us to be doing more of that. But yeah, I really think you've got to think about entertainment and then actually also match experience. When I came into the world of rugby, not being a traditional rugby fan, the one thing that leapt out to me was the match day. It's like off the scale. It's brilliant. It's so much fun. It's an excellent environment and it's a really good experience. And I wanted to really shine a light on that. And so those kind of things are the things that I want us to really be pushing as a marketing team of thinking about.
To your point about match day, and also to the points you made earlier around the data collection, how, as the kind of central league, are you collaborating with the clubs? Because I guess a lot of this is kind of going to have to be done in harmony with the
Yeah.
teams, right? They're responsible for their own match day experience, I would guess.
Yeah.
And then even on the data side, are you able to share data with the clubs? Do you have like a centralized access to what Saracens fan base looks like versus
Yeah.
Northampton, whoever it might be?
So what we're trying to build in the league is essentially my personal goal or my long-term goal is I want every stadium to be sold out in the country every week. And we have some really high demand in some parts of the country, in some pockets of the country, and some lower demand in the others. And the way we work together to cut through all the noise that rugby needs to cut through and all the things we compete with in people's minds and time, we need to work together with the clubs. So I personally catch up with all 10 clubs every week, and we talk about our project around occupancy and ticket sales. And that's all been powered by centrally collecting all the data for ticketing. And so now from a central perspective, we can see revenue coming in, occupancy, we can see the yields, we can see how many junior ticket members are buying. And we spend a lot of time going over that stuff with a fine tooth comb. We've almost built a bit of a trading mentality. We literally call it trading call on Thursdays. But the level deeper than that is that actually, I would say our 10 stadiums and our 10 teams, they're just totally different brands from one another. There is no experience that is the same as the other. Watching a game in Bath at the Rec is totally different to watching a game up at Sale on a Friday night versus watching a game at Mattioli was Welford Road for Leicester Tigers. These are like, they're such great experiences and so unique in their own right. So actually what we need to do is find those moments that we collectively work together to really cut through the noise. And then we need to be working with people on a local level to look at, well, how much data are you capturing? What's your yield like? What's your occupancy like in this week or in a given period? Or do you have a specific challenge around retention, for example, working with those clubs on how we can collectively kind of come together and show that? We've encouraged and empowered the marketing representatives and the growth representatives and the commercial representatives at each club to work together, to share ideas and share ideation. And sometimes that works really well and sometimes it doesn't really go too far. But we very much understand the power of the 10 or the 11 if you include us. We know that we've got to create cut-through moments, and the only way we're going to do that is if we're all working together to deliver those.
That collaborative mindset, I guess, is potentially not something shared by every sports league. You see it more in the US, where there's the sort of centralized model, and everyone's kind of saying like, well, if we grow the value of the NBA or the NFL, it helps all of us. I guess with a lot of European sport, you have promotion relegation, and so you end up with a bit more of a scarcity mindset where the top teams just want to help themselves and don't necessarily want to share best practices.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's hard. It takes a lot of energy. And I think that the key is showing everybody the fruits of their labor. Like we have seen occupancy getting increased. We've got some real success stories up and down the country of where even if performance on the pitch isn't great, that clubs have increased the people of attending their games. And I think that people slowly start to see the benefits of the, all boats rise kind of mentality. That works really well for us. We're not perfect, right? Like we've got so much work to do to continue to go down this route. But what we have done is we've worked collectively with the clubs to create isolated moments. So what we have said is we can't just be on every week and assume that we're going to get cut through and compete against football and sports like WSL and Formula One. What we want to be doing is really isolating our moments of the calendar. And actually, if we could concentrate people's efforts towards those particular weeks, we'll find that our baseline goes up. So a great example is we have a derby weekend that we introduced a couple of years ago. And we ask all our clubs that, let's build towards this moment. That's not to say you forget about your other weeks because everybody's got different priorities. But if we're all building towards these moments and creating campaigns around this one moment, we will cut through and we'll see things like our Google traffic spike, a searches spike. We'll see our clubs sell more tickets because they're local derbies. We schedule them so the best talent is available to play on the pitch. And we worked hand in hand with our broadcast partner TNT to make sure that our language is aligned and we're all talking about it. We're all hyping it up, almost like, again, I use that fight week analogy, but in the build-up, we want people to be talking about rivalries. This work that we've been doing is all a part of this program that we call Collective Insights. So it's like, guys, I get it. You've all got different priorities and different challenges depending on where you are in the country and different levels of demand. But what we can do is work together in these isolated moments and let's see all the tides rise. And I think we're seeing that. We're seeing that now.
I had a conversation earlier in this sort of podcast series with a guy called Michael Yormark, who's at Rock Nation. And they represent a number of rugby players. And he talked about a few things that he thought rugby could do better as a collective, not necessarily just Premiership Rugby, but more broadly. One point he made was around kind of amplifying the star power of individual players. So I'm curious on your take on that. The other part was, and you kind of mentioned it there, was like making sure the best players are available. So one challenge I think that club rugby has in the UK is there's quite a big disparity, I guess, between the number of fans for international rugby that was tuning for a Six Nations or to watch England in the autumn internationals. And I'd probably count myself in this bucket that I'll tune in for the big international games, but I don't necessarily have a team. How do you go about starting to close that gap?
So when I joined Premiership Rugby kind of 2.5 years ago, there was very little talk over the fence between the RFU and Premiership Rugby from a marketing perspective. And one of the things that's come out, as people would have read in the press in the last kind of year, is that we've now got a joint marketing agreement. And the point around that joint marketing agreement, in its core essence, is switching the attention from League Rugby and what's happening in the Premiership every week, and switching it over to what's happening in the Automations and the Six Nations. And then once that finishes, let's flick the switch to the other way. There was almost this feeling, as I was a sports fan outside of rugby, there was always this feeling of like almost like the international scene doesn't acknowledge where these people play in the league. Whereas in football, it's something that's done really, really overtly. You know, Phil Foden of Manchester City plays for England. And so we've seen real shoots of progress there. And now the joint marketing agreement has been signed. We do campaigns together. And that's the objective of them, is to get these international fans a route into club rugby. The second element here, which is really, really crucial, is actually how many people that the RFU speak to are actually able to visit Twickenham and watch a match, watch a top international match, because the demand is off the scale. And so that is a challenge. And so we know that you can watch the best international stars at clubs because that's what they play week in, week out. And so there's this movement which is in its first year, but which will only get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we talked earlier about data sharing, but one of the things with England is they are putting opt-ins, marketing opt-ins and things on their channels for us and our clubs. And on Central Estates, we've got opt-ins for clubs. Like, it all works together, and there's acknowledgement that it can all work in a harmonious way. And we're not stealing market share by any means. So that's really crucial. On the point around your podcast a few weeks ago around star power, we may or may not have circulated that around the business, because it really spoke to us. Like, it spoke to me, because it's exactly what we're trying to do and what we want to do. So we are faced with a really big challenge in rugby players. We've lost those personalities. The most popular rugby players don't actually play rugby anymore. If you look at social following and things like that, we've got a job to build the next generation of people coming through. We're seeing this in a number of sports, right? And we're no different. And all of the research that we've got suggests that before somebody matures in their late teen years, they've pretty much decided what sport they're going to follow. And they follow individuals. They follow the athlete. It's way less around the team. And as a result, we really want to promote the next 10, 20, 30, 40 players that we think are going to be the real face of Gallagher Premiership Rugby. And we have a project around that. So, you know, we are working on, well, what does content look like? But where we're going to need the support is of the clubs. We have to do it together, because without the clubs, I can't get access to that player on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Thursday afternoon to do some bit of content. And there is cultural difficulty there. You know, some of the newer school coming through who really understand the commercial opportunities available to them by raising their profile and the benefit it could do for the sport and the club, they get it. But some of the people who are probably a little bit more, maybe I'll call them old school, they're more like, look, you need to focus on your rugby and not worry about other things. We aren't versed that way in this sport, and that's a challenge that we're trying to address head on. What's really encouraging is I think clubs really do get it. I do think they understand. I don't think we've quite conquered how we're going to get there, but we do. Everybody understands and everybody's bought in that we need to build some stars. And I think the point around how we work with England is like, they've acknowledged it. Like, we've got common shared goals which involve increasing the social following of England players, because it just benefits everybody, and they are commonly shared. So yeah, we acknowledge it. I think the chord was struck was bang on. And it's something that we're working on, but it's not an overnight fix. This is going to take time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one bit that stood out to me when I went on your website, which kind of ties into both the acknowledgement of trying to build star power, but also of that collaboration kind of mindset, was, I think, like 2 of the 3 posts that are visible on the website right now are Lions Watch.
Yeah.
And are basically profiling players that could make the Lions squad, which
Yeah.
one is building the profile of individuals, but it's also trying to bridge that gap between Lions, which a bit like international rugby gets a disproportionate kind of audience, versus the club game, bringing yourself into that conversation.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So we've talked a lot about the JMA this year, but actually we've got an agreement with the Lions too. And it's something which is, you know, the way I look at it is, though, if there's conversations going on about England or about the Lions or about sport and rugby in general, is that how are we showing up in those moments? And We work really closely with the Lions, actually. They're a really great team. They're a really tight-knit team, and there's only a handful of them. They get so much work done. But what they are is super, super collaborative. So we talk to them once every couple of weeks, and we talk about opportunities. And a lot of our opportunities are aligned on certain goals. So, for example, they want data as well. Hey, guess what? So do we. So, working together on how a data play can work and how we get more fan data is something that we work on together. And the story at the moment in the Premiership is one of who's going to win this, who's going to win the title at the end of the year, because it is super, super competitive, as it always is. But the other half of the story is, well, Lions watch. Who's going to get selected? There are going to be a lot of players and a lot of fans that are going to be disappointed, and it creates lots of talking points. And this is going back to my original point. Well, how do you take care of your core audience and not take your eye off the ball of the core audience? For me, is moments like this. You can't acknowledge that these players aren't going to be playing somewhere else in the summer. You can't acknowledge that these guys don't go off for the Six Nations or in the autumn to do something else. You've got to really show the fans that it's all one. I suppose you're singing off one hymn sheet and then you're promoting a message. But it's in everybody's interest, right? If there's a couple of players picked from Sale, you want every Sale fan to be watching that game, because it's great, because they watch rugby and they don't forget about it. And it's great for Lions viewership, and it's great for us. And then when those guys are playing really well for Lions, you want them to be then watching the first game of the season for, up north for Sale Sharks. By the way, I don't know who's getting picked. I don't know if there's going to be two people from Sale Sharks or not. But yeah, it all makes sense for us to be connected.
Yeah, don't worry. I won't ask you for an inside scoop.
No, none available, not to me. Not to me.
Yeah, I guess that brings us on quite nicely to the topic of the final. Now, one thing that stood out for me in the kind of pre-podcast prep was that you sold 7,000 tickets for the final, basically straight after the final whistle of last year's final.
That's
now,
right.
why that seems, as a sports fan of a football team, and then I follow a little bit the international rugby and cricket, that seems counterintuitive to me, because I would only want to go to a final if it was my team in it, right? So, and that's a Spurs fan, that doesn't happen too often. So what's making people buy a ticket to a final that their team may not get to? And even we're currently match week, I think 16 games played, so 2 games left. It's still up for grabs, unless you're Bath, who have probably won the title, but still could not make the final if they lose to the 4th place team. What does that look like in terms of, you're essentially selling a sort of festival of rugby? Or like, the best I can kind of liken it to is when the NFL comes over to the UK and you'll get people wearing all the team shirts at the games, even if those teams aren't playing. Is that kind of the vibe that you're striding for?
That's absolutely it. That's absolutely it, Andy. We know that we had a challenge on our hands. So when I came into the role, we started off with the final of Sale Sharks versus Saracens, and the timing was awful because we've had some bad news around rugby. There was a cost of living crisis really taking a grip on the country, and we were competing with a lot of different sporting events, and we ended up with a really low attendance. And when we peeled it back, Simon Massey Taylor, our chief executive, kind of said to us, like, this is supposed to be our Super Bowl moment. And the point around that it's not around halftime shows or that kind of thing. It was very much around, it doesn't matter who's playing in the Super Bowl. Everybody watches it and everybody attends it if they can get their hands on a ticket. And that's what we were trying to create. And when we took that away and understood what that meant, was we needed to build a product which was really highlighting itself as the pinnacle of sport. So we had gone too far in the direction. We had gone too far in the 2023 final of promoting it as a bit of a fun family day out. And yes, it is a really great day out for families, but actually that's not the ticket that we were trying to sell. The ticket we were trying to sell was, of course, families are welcome, and they do come in their droves. But there's nothing else like this in this country for sport. The league, the whole season's effort is decided in one match, and that doesn't happen anywhere else. And the person who lifts that trophy walks away as a champion, and you don't have to have finished top. And when we started to look at it that way, we then started to go, well, we need to build this out and really relentlessly test our assumptions around the marketing on this. And what we did was we worked with our partners and our creative agencies to really test all of the creative. And what we found was fans were really receptive to the action. We really want to dial up and showcase the intensity of the sport in our marketing. Turns out it works really well for our final as well. So yes, we still promote the kind of family imagery type, lifestyle type imagery on some of our marketing material, but we do it at certain points of the year. So we'll do it in and around Christmas, and we have a family offer too. Like, we got the pricing really right this year, and I hope we continue to do that. And we've managed to get, I think it's like 2 adults, 2 kids going for £100, which is an amazing way to go and see a final at the home of rugby. And if you compare that to an England match, again, due to its availability and demand, if you really want to watch international stars and you're new to the game, or you're kind of more of a casual fan, this is the place you want to go to. So last year we had 33% of the stadium was, or maybe it was 32% of the stadium, did not support Northampton or Bath, because people are just like, this is just an amazing game and a great day out at Twickenham. And we've become relentlessly obsessed by the number. So I know it sounds really kind of probably quite early 2000s, but we have like a WhatsApp group that we just exchange messages with constantly. Who's bought today, or what fans have bought today, or Exeter lost today, and yet we've seen 100 fans of theirs buy tickets. Like, we've become so obsessed with the number, and what that's done is it's given us a real testing culture. We test our assumptions relentlessly. So I'll give you an example of where we had 1,000 tickets left a week ago. We couldn't decide if what was going to sound better, what was going to tap into FOMO. Was it 1,000 left? Was it almost sold out? Or was it 50,000 sold? Like, what are the messages? What works? What doesn't? And we put all this creative into test, and we're really nimble and really agile around it. And we let the platform do the talking. And it's such an efficient way to do marketing, because you've not put yourself in a creative straitjacket where everything has to look in one particular way. You've picked broad themes and principles that you want to sell. So ours is the action and the intensity and the final and the showpiece of the occasion. And then we let Meta and Google do the deciding for the rest of it. And that's really, really worked for us. So to put it in context, like, we're sold out now. There are only tickets available for the finalist teams. And even then, there are going to be a lot of disappointed fans. Last year, we sold out, but we sold out much later. We sold out a few days before the final itself. And the reason we sold so many tickets at full time last year is because we knew, well, our NPS score is always through the roof, and people have a great day, even if their team has not won. If they choose to support one of the teams, they always have a great day. And if you can actually go on sale and harness that good vibe, that good momentum, and especially in the week when they're talking to their friends and family and telling people how they've managed to get the hottest ticket in town, you've got to harness that FOMO. And I think, going back right to the beginning of our chat, and we talked about my career and my experience of selling hobbies and selling fandom, it basically all ties back down to FOMO. Everything is an element of FOMO, whether it's Glastonbury tickets, whether it's Winter Wonderland tickets here in London, or whether it's the Premiership final. You just want to create this sense of FOMO. And that, for me, is like something that we've now got, and we plan on harnessing it for years to come to create our Super Bowl moment in the UK.
In terms of that, also that net promoter score kind of idea, and then not necessarily being entirely tied to the result, that reminds me a little bit more of like when you go to a music concert where everyone leaves happy. Obviously, not everyone's leaving happy from a Premiership Rugby final. There's an element of disappointment if your team's not won, but
Yes.
If you can build out an experience whereby that isn't the only parameter on which people are judging their day, then you are going to get less volatility, I guess, in your sort of fandom and purchasing decisions.
Absolutely. And we worked with the fan experience company on what our match day looks like. And so much of their advice said to us, it's about communication. Assume that somebody's never been to the stadium before. Tell them how long it takes to walk from the station to the stadium. Tell them what time to be at their seat if you're planning on doing some sort of activation before full time. Give them a map. That Twickenham, we go there for the first time, it can be a bit daunting if there's 80,000 people on site. Like, you've got the fan village, you've got food vendors absolutely everywhere. There's places to drink everywhere. And I'm just like, this is nuts. And so we built kind of maps, and it's something that we did at Pollen actually, but we built maps of the site to give to people. We have digital ticketing. So we encourage everybody the night before, download it. And we do it for 2 weeks before, where we say to people, download it. This is how you scan, give them all the information. And if you overly communicate and just go above and beyond, you'll broadly find that people's sentiment is really positive about the day. And that's what we wanted to do. So we wanted to take into account that at least a third of the fans probably support one of the teams. And so they're going to be disappointed from a pitch perspective. But what you can do is make their experience of the day really, really good. And I go back to my point, like a day at the rugby is A1. It's absolutely brilliant. And we lean into that. We have lots of activations which are targeted at families, and we do lots in our fan village when it comes to music and entertainment. But we also, I think it's important to note, is we balance our budget with how the product looks on TV too, because we've said, okay, we'll have 80,000 people on site and we'll have maybe 30,000 visit the West Fan Village, if not a little bit more. You can't disproportionately put your budget in there. You've actually got to create things that people see on television and say, do you know what? I really want to go there next year. And if you can speak to the production team and the commentators and the talent on TNT, and they're always open to it, you can kind of say to them, look, make sure you're really talking up the fact that today was a sellout and create a moment of it being a sellout. And we do that. And we work with them hand in glove to do that sort of stuff. So it all comes together to create this, I suppose, this moment. And again, going back to the point around cut through, we really have to cut through on our last day, which is the final on June the 14th this year.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask, my follow-up question to what you just said was going to be about, like you say, there's going to be a lot of disappointed fans. But I guess the double-edged sword is if you're really building this up to be an amazing experience and then people miss out, it's how do you then facilitate that demand in some other way, right? Whether it's watching on TV or it's going to a fan village, like what are other opportunities for you to activate and engage around what is essentially your showpiece day?
So it's really funny, right? Sometimes I think we've got the perception of when the thing sold out, we put our feet up. I think last year when the thing sold out, I think I was at Twickenham and I remember the day really well. We were right at the top of the stadium trying to get these seats that often aren't used because they're not particularly accessible. And we were trying to put them on sale. And we work really, really hard right through to basically when the event's done, right? And so the way we activate around it is the sellout's one part. You bank the sellout, great, good, well done. You're going to have thousands of people there. But actually, how does that show up on your social content? How are you pushing the broadcaster to their limit of what they can produce? How is it going to show up on our influencer feeds? Like we have a group of influencers that we work with. And like, how are they getting the best experience to showcase it? Because all of a sudden our attention switches to people in bowl to basically not in the bowl. And how are we going to show up on those timelines and feeds? And yeah, it's the same this year. Selling it out, I think we've only really got busier since, because we are now all hands to the pump on what the day looks like and how we're going to activate it along with our different influencers, our different commercial partners, our broadcast partner.
What does that look like from an influencer perspective? Like, have you identified user-generated content creators in the sort of rugby space?
Yeah, so we kind of try and balance it with a combination of people who are in the rugby space, but maybe loosely in it and not really, not bread and butter in it. And because the objective of our influencers is to get eyeballs on the sport that won't traditionally be on ours. So we work with a lot of influencers who are A, from diverse backgrounds, and B, a lot of families as well. But we also work with people who are kind of like gladiators and people who've been on the traitors, things like this. It's how we show up is really important, and they will do stuff throughout the season. We don't just turn on a load of influencer activation on the final. It works throughout the season. They go to games, they go to the showdown at Tottenham Hotspur, the big day out at Cardiff, which Bristol host. They'll go to the Harlequins games at Twickenham, and we get them to film and capture lots of content in hopefully an authentic way. But then they come together at the final and do lots of activation around that. So we will give them, in some cases, access to the stadium beforehand. We'll give them tunnel tours so they can get a real behind the scenes look. Give people stuff that they want to watch on socials that they won't be able to watch on broadcast. Broadcasts aren't going to show you how it's all looking, in and around the stadium and the tunnel before the players have arrived necessarily. They might not go on air till 45 minutes or an hour before kickoff, whereas we'll have all that. And that's how we really empower those influencers to capture good content, unique content too.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important to be able to tell stories from different perspectives. If you're looking to attract new audiences, then you need people that can authentically speak to those audiences to be the ones telling them. Like, that's going to come through a lot stronger than the same messaging that already isn't working.
And so much of the work we do is around that. Like, we're not expecting an influencer to post something on their channel, and then 2 days later we get 100 new fans that want to buy a ticket to a match in Northampton. It's not going to work like that. We understand there's a funnel to nurture and nurture those users through, and so we're really realistic with our expectations as well.
Mm.
That point I made around where we show up is really crucial to us. We want to target those sports fans, right? We internally call them the avid sports fan, but I think I am an avid sports fan. I'm somebody who's dead into golf, dead into football, love cricket. We'll watch boxing, we'll watch a little bit of UFC now and again, and watch a bit of Formula One. But I'm consuming sport all day long, and we try and build partnerships with that in mind. How are we going to be in the forefront of the mind of this kind of fan? And one of the examples is we have a deal with TalkSport, and TalkSport will preview the games before each round, normally on a Thursday or a Friday, and we get about 10 minutes on slot, and we support it with talent. We'll get a player to talk about a match that's a given focus on a given weekend, and TalkSport will also broadcast the final on radio. And it's so much effort that gets poured into getting this over the line, whether it's the deal, whether it's getting the talent on it. But everybody knows it's worth it, because at the end of the day, either side of that slot, they've been talking about Champions League football, probably Premier League. They've probably been talking about some boxing and darts and these kind of sports. We've got to show up in those conversations and appear relevant to these avid sports fans to then gain benefit in brand awareness. Our brand awareness is the highest it's been in about 3 years, 4 years, and we're growing amongst 18 to 35-year-olds, and we want to harness that. We want to continue to do what we're doing because it's going great guns, and we want to continue to do that.
Yeah. I think the common theme there, and I read, and I could be getting the numbers slightly wrong, I think Unilever has upped its marketing spend to 50% is now social media, and I think they want to work with 20 times the number of creators.
Yeah.
There's like really this move of sort of saying, and I mean, it's true of the NFL, for example, giving certain content to YouTube kind of content creators to be able to create their own highlight shows and commentary around certain matches. Like there is this definite shift in like decentralizing the messaging and saying we're going to have a core set of things that we stand for, but then we're going to let others tell that story. It doesn't all have to come through our social channels directly or through our centralized messaging. And we're not going to get everyone turning up to premiershiprugby.com to do stuff. Like so if they're on TikTok, then we want to just appear on TikTok. If they're listening to TalkSport, we want to appear on TalkSport. We don't need to always convert everything to be happening on our terms.
Exactly. And as a result of some of that shift, right, we've started to mix our focus on followers, but also engagement, right? It's because we know that the way that the algorithm's working is that we don't always have to follow people to see their content. The feed and the powers that be will decide what appears on your feed. And we want to be a part of that conversation. And so we are really, really attuned to that as well. So that's where influencers come in. That's where our partnerships with TalkSport come in. And we even work really closely with TNT around their campaigns. So they, when it's the playoffs, when it's the Derby weekend, when it's the Christmas fixtures, which have always got really high attendance, TNT do so much work on their channels and speak to their audience about rugby. And we make sure that we're a part of that as well and support it as best we can. And that is all in the spirit of, you know what, this isn't just all of us sitting going to magic up 1,000 or 10,000 more followers. You've got to be showing up on those feeds and you need to be appearing relevant. So that's definitely within our thinking as well at the moment.
Yeah. I think with some sports, you get this conversation around OTT platforms and you just go direct to consumer. And I think that sometimes misses the kind of importance, I guess, of having broadcast partners that are willing to support and kind of increase your visibility. But maybe we just round things up with you giving a little bit of an idea to listeners of where your attention is going to be focused over the next sort of 12 to 24 months and what success looks like for you in the sort of short to medium term.
So our focus now is very much on, we've got a rebrand coming in the summer, and it's an open secret. Everybody knows we're looking to rebrand, and that will be something that we focus on as a team and delivering that. The next part to that actually is our player strategy. So we talked earlier about trying to build out more players, more player personalities, and more content that's centered around players. That is going to be the thing that keeps us busy for the next, I think, 6 months to 2 years. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of expertise, but we're confident that we've got the right partners there. So I think for me, if we're going to say what does success look like, I think seeing more of our players become household names and recognizable people, I think will be a big feather in our hat. And you've only got to look across kind of rugby with the likes of Alona Mara and the kind of impact that she's had on rugby and what she's done on a social perspective. That should be the gold standard that everybody's aiming for. I don't think it's insurmountable to say that we would have one or two people that do that as well. But we need more of them, because without it, the attention on the sport will just dwindle a bit. We don't want that.
Yeah, it's just super exciting, and really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of these insights. And yeah, looking forward to watching the final and seeing who comes out on top.
Yes, it's going to be a great day. So do tune into TNT Sports Day to watch it.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Pundit podcast. I'll include more info about the guest and the topics covered in the show notes. And you can also find my LinkedIn profile if you'd like to connect and let me know what you thought. Visit sportspundit.co to find previous editions of the podcast, access the newsletter, and to sign up for our WhatsApp group and see upcoming social events in cities around the world. See you again soon.